Obviously, this show's a pretty rehashed topic on my channel, and so what better way to lean into that than to talk about the episodes whose stories I think are overdone. Now, talking about what qualifies as a rehash or ripoff, most of the story has to be taken from the other episode. Bumper to Bumper isn't a ripoff of Driven to Tears, for example, just because they have the same setting. And also, rehashes are bad. Like, if an episode rehashes another, I'm not going to count it the same as if it happens to end up being better. But that rarely happens, and I don't think it affects this list that much. I say that, though, to say that for our number 5 entry, the last point I made actually does affect the list, because rehashes of Walking Small have actually produced some pretty good episodes. Plankton teaming up with a member of the main cast is kind of a generic plotline, and it does take a lot to make it stand out. Walking Small was always one of the more forgettable Season 1 episodes, so I do think there was potential in revisiting the concepts. And it was realized in episodes like Chum Fricassee and Perfect Chemistry. But then you have some worse examples like Sweet and Sour Squid and The Other Patty. Either way, this is only number 5 because the rehashing is kind of loose and doesn't copy the original episode too much, and we got some decent episodes from revisiting the idea. I will say that in general, the first 3 seasons most often contain the templates for these episodes because there's been more time since those episodes for the production crew to rehash the same idea. And by the way, there's no judgment with that. SpongeBob's been around for 25 years. Of course, it's going to be harder and harder to come up with original ideas the longer the show goes on. Okay, stop me if you've heard this one before. Some new change happens to the Krusty Krab that ends up making a lot of money and saddening SpongeBob, so he tries to make things go back to the way they were. Oh, what? Krusty Dogs? No, I wasn't talking about that. Selling out? No, I wasn't talking about that one either. Goodbye, Krabby Pat? Okay, I think you get the point. We can do this forever, can't we? But the point is, a lot of episodes follow that template, and why Bossy Boots is number 4 is that it didn't really result in any bad ripoffs per se, but the sheer volume of episodes that have copy-pasted Bossy Boots' original story had to place it on this list. And uniquely, compared to the other stories we'll talk about, this one's really hard to deviate from in an interesting way, because every single time this plot has gone back to the status quo, and it has to hit the same beats every time. Now, with something like Model Sponge, whenever another episode has to tackle the subject of SpongeBob losing his job, they can vary it up. While SpongeBob You're Fired might just be the worst episode of the entire show, it clearly takes a very different direction to Model Sponge, The Big Switch, and other episodes. But with Bossy Boots, Selling Out, Krusty Dogs, etc., almost all of the same beats have to be done and are done pretty much worse every time, with the exception of Goodbye Krabby Patty, which deviated by having the focus be on Patrick's deteriorating friendship with SpongeBob. And it ended up being the best episode of the set because of that. My favorite episode of the entire SpongeBob series is the Krusty Krab training video. Its combination of a unique style with clever understanding of the show's setting and characters, along with some of the best jokes in the entire show, make it difficult to top. But, of course, that didn't stop them from trying to top it so many times. And not once did they really capture the magic. Boat Smarts was stupid. It's been the entire episode telling the same joke, and that joke is that good drivers get injured and bad drivers walk away unscathed. It's just that for the entire episode, and while that might be funny at first, it gets pretty boring when that's the only joke. Then there's SpongeBob vs. the Patty Gadget, which is alright, if a bit forgettable. Then there's No Pictures Please, which is pretty annoying, and there's Patnocchio, which is also annoying. And just all of these episodes that are framed as if they're a part of something else get so tiring, because it's so obvious what they're trying and failing to do. You can't make another Krusty Krab training video. It's almost impossible to try to recapture that magic, but they keep doing it to worse and worse returns. There's even more of them after Patnocchio as well, and spoiler alert, those don't get better. Maybe they'll just try to make good stories and not have to shoehorn in some framing device to be like an episode from 2 decades ago. On a basic level, there's a genre of SpongeBob episodes about Plankton trying to steal the Krabby Patty formula. And of the episodes that fit into that mold, there's a specific type that's really overdone. You know them as the Plankton disguises himself as X episodes. and this type is rather infamous for being especially prevalent in Season 7, as Season 7 has not one, not two, but 3 of them, and 2 of them are awful, with the other one just being average. But just off the top of my head, some of the disguises we've seen from Plankton are Mr. Krabs in the original Imitation Krabs, a psychiatrist, Sandy, his own grandmother, Gary, a stack of money, a genie, a ghost, and a florist. This is so overdone, and pretty much none of these besides Fear of a Krabby Patty resulted in an episode I'd ever want to come back to. The rewatch value on these is basically non-existent, because aside from Fear of a Krabby Patty, once you've seen one of these, you've seen them all. And in quite a bit of these, it seems like Plankton is close and almost gets the secret formula, but things have to go back to normal at the end. Obviously, no one watches SpongeBob for the suspense, and if you're looking for jokes, a lot of the same jokes are told in these episodes. Lots of things being difficult for Plankton on the inside of whatever disguise he's in, and the other characters being oblivious to it. They all have the same kind of feel to them, and because there's so many, it's why Imitation Krabs is high on this list. The most rehashed SpongeBob episode was actually hard to determine. You have to decide how much of the original episode's premise is reused in the subsequent episodes, and you also have to decide how bad each rehashed episode is. And in the end, for my number 1 episode, I went with Karate Choppers. It follows the classic type of Mr. Krabs telling SpongeBob not to do something, SpongeBob doing that thing, and then suffering the consequences. Sometimes they vary it up and have Squidward or another character tell SpongeBob not to do something, but usually it's Mr. Krabs. And what put this one over the edge is them not even waiting until Season 1 was over to try this exact story again, because Hooky is just Karate Choppers. Now, Hooky is not a bad episode by any means, and it does manage to tell some unique jokes, so there is some value to watching Hooky on its own, but the same cannot be said for most of the numerous ripoffs Karate Choppers spawn. I mean, we have Graveyard Shift, Sailor Mouth, Wet Painters, Funny Pants, Bummer Vacation, A Day Without Tears, The Main Train, Phase Freeze, Yeti Crabs, need I go on? And yeah, not all of those follow the exact same mold, and some of those are actually pretty good, but they're all pretty similar. And the later you go on, the more derivative and stale it gets. You can tell similar stories, but you have to add jokes, and honestly, these ripoffs have fewer and fewer jokes the later into the show you get. But the reason I put this one so high is because they've been doing it since the very beginning. Thanks for watching, guys. If you liked the video, leave a like and a subscription, it always helps the channel, and leave your own list in the comments. Have a good one.